So we are in this series called Life Hacks, which if you're not familiar with the term, by definition, if you go online, there are a couple of different ones, but essentially it is any technique or strategy that can help you manage life to make it more fruitful, more productive, more efficient. And the idea behind Life Hacks is if you will apply these things, then your life will just be better. And so I don't know when the term came out. Dela, do you know when, or anybody know when that term life hack was? When was it? Anybody know over here? You guys are young. Okay, so it's fairly recent. But what we need to appreciate is that there have been some life hacks in the scriptures that have been here for millennia. And we didn't call it that. But if you read through the book of Proverbs, there are all these little tweets that we get that if we would apply these things to our lives, we could step into the fullness of life that God has for us. So that's what we're doing this summer. We're looking at these different little life hacks around different themes, different areas of our lives. The first week we looked at the life hack about guarding our heart. Because as Proverbs 4:23 says, that we need to guard our heart because it is the wellspring of life, meaning everything that's going on out here, everything in my life out here, it's coming from what's in here. And so in order for this to go well, we need to make sure we're guarding our heart, we're guarding what's inside so that the source is good. And then 2 weeks ago, we looked at the life hack of fear. And we talked about the fact that most of us wouldn't see that fear was really a good thing. But in the Proverbs, it talks about the fear of the Lord as the thing that brings life. And fear, the things that we fear are the things that determine the boundaries of our life. And so when we fear the Lord, we realize that God has our best interest in mind. And we looked at 1 John 4, where it says that perfect love casts out all fear and that God is love. And therefore, if we fear God, who is love, every other fear goes away. And now the only boundary in our life is the boundary of love. And that drives out every other fear. And then last week we talked about some life hacks with regard to friendship and relationships and how life can be better if we have these certain types of friends in our life. This morning, the life hack that I want us to consider is the idea of teachability. To get us started, I wonder how many of you are familiar with the phrase, I don't care how much you know unless I know how much you care. Anybody know this? Okay. So let's think about that for a minute. I don't care how much you know unless I know how much you care. What I would like for us to consider this morning is whether or not that's actually a good posture for life. See, our tendency is, if I don't know that you care about me, then I'm not really going to listen to what you have to say to me. If I don't know you and know that you are really invested in my life, then I will have a tendency to be dismissive of the things that you say. But is that really a good posture for us to be in? Over the years, I have received some, not all that encouraging feedback, okay? And sometimes it's been verbal, but sometimes it's in written form. And I got this note about 5 years ago. It's got my name on the outside typed. It is one sheet of paper. There's a paragraph on the inside. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph to you. There's no name, no signature. And this was left in my inbox. And here's one sentence that I'll read to you. You are a wonderful teacher and a godly man, but your people skills leave much to be desired. And you swing from going to great lengths to placate conflict when you don't have a strong stake in the outcome to becoming overbearing when you do. I don't know who that's from. So what do I do with that? Do I disregard it? Do I throw it in the trash? I don't know that this person cares about me. They may have an axe to grind. I don't know. So do I just disregard it? Or do I put it in my desk in a place where I run across it every week or two and pull it out and think, okay, do my people skills need work? Am I placating conflict in any area of my life? Am I being overbearing in any area of my life? Do I allow these words to make a difference in me even though I don't know who they came from? See, that's what teachability is. Now, I'm not saying that I'm always that teachable, but anyway. What I'd like for us to consider this morning is that maybe, just maybe, if we hold on to the philosophy of, I don't care how much you know unless I know how much you care, we may actually be keeping ourselves from growing in ways that God would have us to grow so that we can step into the fullness of life that He has for us. So let's see what the life hacks that the Proverbs have for us about teachability. Now, when I was preparing for this series, I asked our whole staff to read through the book of Proverbs and come up with different themes, and we put them all up on a board, and we kind of said, well, you know, this one seems to be, you know, higher priority than another one, and I actually read through the book of Proverbs a couple of 3 times, and just made some notes as I was going through. And I would encourage you to read through the book of Proverbs because it will seriously mess with your life, okay? And many of you probably are aware of this, but Proverbs has 31 chapters, and so if you just take one a day and read through that proverb, it'll take you, 3 or 4 minutes, and God will bring something up that you can go, ooh, I need to be thinking about that today. Anyway. So as I read through the Proverbs, there were these themes that kept popping up, some of which I really didn't like. And one of the ones that I really didn't like was this theme of discipline and correction. I read this in Proverbs 5:12. How I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. And I'm thinking, you got that right. I would not obey my teachers or turn my ear to my instructors. And then I read in Proverbs 9:8, do not rebuke mockers or they will hate you. Rebuke the wise and they will love you. Instruct the wise and they will be wiser still. Teach the righteous and they will add to their learning. And then in 10:17, whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life, but whoever ignores correction leads others astray. See, all of those are about correction and discipline. And then I got to Proverbs 12, and this one hit me right between the eyes. Proverbs 12:1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. Now I thought, is this the Bible? I mean, maybe this is just a weird translation. I mean, it's the New International Version, but maybe they got this wrong. And so I looked at some other translations. The New Century Version, anyone who loves learning accepts correction, but a person who hates being corrected is stupid. New English Version, the one who loves discipline loves knowledge, but the one who hates reproof is stupid. Contemporary English Version, to accept correction is wise, to reject it is stupid. So do you see a theme here? So I thought, well, I don't really want to be stupid. And then I read some more, and Proverbs 12:15 says, the way of the fool seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. 13:8, whoever disregards discipline comes to poverty and shame, but whoever heeds correction is honored. 15:5, a fool spurns discipline, but whoever heeds correction shows prudence. Verse 10, stern discipline awaits anyone who leaves the path meaning wisdom, and the one who hates correction will die. 15:32, those who disregard discipline despise themselves, but the one who heeds correction gains understanding. So what jumped out at me in all of this is that we tend to buy into the idea of, I don't care how much you know unless I know how much you care. And when people we dislike or people we know don't really care about us, or when an anonymous source gives us insight or instruction or drops a piece of correction on us, we tend to reject that. We tend to give it little weight. I don't know about you, but I like to create a list of people over here that I'm going to listen to, right? These are the people that I'm going to let speak into my life. And if you're not on that list, well, I'm just not going to pay that much attention to you. But what I think the Proverbs are inviting us to is this posture of, I can learn from anybody. I can learn from anything. And I'm not only going to be open to correction, but I'm actually going to seek it. Because correction's going to make life different. If you take all of the verses in Proverbs that have to do with correction, you have one of two choices. You can love correction or you can hate correction. And if you love correction, what you find in the Proverbs is that it's going to lead to a life of honor. It's going to lead to a life of wisdom. It's going to lead to a life of beauty. It's going to lead to a life of love. It's actually going to lead to life. But if you hate correction, it leads to dishonor and poverty. And it may not be poverty in a monetary or materialistic way. It may be poverty of relationships. It may be poverty of spirit. It leads to shame. What else does it lead to? It actually leads to despising yourself. And it leads to death. So which of those lists do you like better? I kind of like the one on the left. And what the scriptures are telling us is, if we hate correction, if we avoid correction, if we run away from correction, we're actually running away from the life, the fullness of life that God has for us. The statement, whoever hates correction is stupid, makes me a little defensive. And if you were here last week, I shared this with you, but I've got some good friends in my life who have sat me down over, many times to call me out on some behavior in my life that is less than what God would have for me. And one of the things I've been called on more than once is my defensiveness, to which my response is, I'm not defensive. Have you ever thought that maybe you were defensive? Haven't you seen me grow in my defensiveness? I am a whole lot less defensive than I used to be. But see, the thing is, I don't like to be wrong. And I don't like it when people call me out on areas where I'm wrong. See, it's not a natural tendency for us to lean into correction. How many of us actually like it when people come up to us and say, hey, I've noticed this going on in your life, and that's probably not the best thing for you. And it's probably not the best thing for the people around you. Do we like it when we're called out that way? I don't. But what the scriptures are telling us is when we allow correction in our lives, it leads to a better life. How many of you are familiar with the S curve? A few people? All right, so here's a little tutorial on the S curve. The S curve is used for organizations, for businesses, for churches, and the principles of the S curve are true across the board. Okay, so what happens with the S curve is you've got this. You're rocking along as a business, and then things start going downhill. And so at this point in your business or your organization or your church or whatever, you introduce a new initiative, or you bring in a new leader, or you start a new program. You do something to try to change the trajectory of your organization that's going down. And what happens is, for the first period of time, the organization keeps going down, but then it levels out, and hopefully, if you've done it right, you'll start going up again, okay? But then eventually it'll level out again, and it'll start going back down, all right? So that's the S curve. And you've all heard people talk about staying ahead of the curve. That's where it comes from. Because a good business, a good organization will try to stay ahead of the curve, and they will try to implement something new, gain some new insight, do something early so that they don't have to go down anymore. So that if they'll implement something new here or something new here, then they don't have to experience the downturn. They don't have to experience the crisis. They stay ahead of the curve. This principle is true in life. I think most of us, when things are going south, that's when we want somebody to come in and fix it. But when things are going okay, when life's just kind of fine, I'm not too interested in correction. I'm not too interested in somebody putting something in my box, because, hey, everything seems to be going just fine right now. But what if we had a posture where, as we're going through life, we didn't wait until we were down here to try to get insight. We didn't wait till we were down here before we asked somebody to speak into our life. What if at some point up here we say, I want to stay ahead of the curve. I want to make sure that I've got a mentor or somebody helping me to see the areas where I am not hitting on all cylinders. I want somebody to help give me insight and speak truth into my life so that I don't have to go down. I can keep the trajectory going up. What if we did that? See, what the life hacks that Proverbs is giving us is saying you can do that. You can seek out wisdom. You can seek out correction. You can seek out rebuke. You can ask people to look objectively at your life and say, hey, do you see some place where I could be doing better? And if we will listen to that, then we can stay ahead of the curve. We can keep things going up. You know, good coaches go in at halftime, even when their team is winning, and they make halftime corrections. They don't just come in and say, hey, you guys played a great first half, just go and chill during halftime, and we'll go out and we'll just keep doing the same thing in the second half. Good coaches don't do that. Good coaches, whether they're down or up, go in and they make halftime adjustments. They say, hey, you guys are doing great, but we could have executed this a little bit better. We could have played this technique a little stronger. That's what we need in life. We need to always be looking for that kind of correction. What the Proverbs are telling us is that your relationship to correction is your relationship to your future. Do I need to say that again? Your relationship to correction is your relationship to your future. Because if you don't listen, you're going downhill. But if you will listen, you have opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. Ken Blanchard is one of the business and leadership gurus of our generation, and he said, feedback is the breakfast of champions. But sometimes feedback gets uncomfortable. And there are several areas in our life where feedback is very uncomfortable. Feedback is uncomfortable when we are making moral decisions in our life. Isn't it? Usually, when I'm making moral decisions, I want to make those decisions myself. I don't want someone else speaking into that decision. When I'm making spiritual decisions, I want to make those decisions myself, and I don't want you to pretend that you know from God better than I do. So we get defensive when people try to speak into our lives in those areas. Another area is parenting. I mean, most parents that I have had the privilege of being around tend to say, I'm going to raise my kids the way I want to raise my kids. Parenting my children is my business and nobody else's. Too often we live according to the idea of, I don't care how much you know unless I know how much you care. I don't want to listen to you unless I'm absolutely confident you have my best interests in mind. But in reality, we can learn from everyone. Proverbs 9:8 says, rebuke the wise and they will love you. 19:25 says, rebuke the discerning and they will gain knowledge. 25:12 says, like an earring of gold or an ornament of fine gold is the rebuke of a wise judge to a listening ear. You see, rebukes and corrections are things that we should look for and, dare I say, even thirst for. No, I don't love getting anonymous letters in my inbox. but I need them. And I need to learn from them. So here's a good self-assessment regarding teachability. Ready? How willing am I to learn from anyone? How willing am I to learn from anyone? Or maybe you could put it like this. What's the time lapse between when someone makes an observation or comment on my life that's hard for me to hear? What's the time lapse between when they make that comment to the time when I say, I really ought to consider that? See, that's how teachable you are. If somebody says, I've been watching this in your life, and I really think you ought to pay attention to this. If immediately I'm dismissive and I say, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't care. They don't really care about me. But hours later, days later, weeks later, something happens where I go, I probably ought to pay attention to what that person said. See, the time lapse between when you hear it and when you consider it, respond to it, that's how teachable you are. And if somebody says it and you immediately say, you know what? I've never thought that. I've never thought about that. I thought my people skills were pretty good. But hey, if you're seeing it different, I need to consider that. Anyone who hates correction is stupid. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be stupid. And what the scriptures are telling us is we need to be open to whatever God brings into our lives with regard to correction from any source. Now, they may not be right, but that does not mean that we shouldn't be open and have an awareness that the Lord may be using this person, even if this person annoys us to no end. The Lord may actually be using this person to bring something to our attention that if we would do something about it, it would actually bring honor and wisdom and beauty and love and life into our life. I've been in ministry for over 30 years, and I've been a lead pastor for over 25 years. And I am celebrating my 35th wedding anniversary next month. But I've still got a lot to learn about life and ministry and leadership and being a good husband and being a good father and being a good friend, and you can just keep adding to that list. What if I just sat back and said, I've been in ministry for 3 decades, I've been married for over 3 decades, and I got it all nailed. That would be stupid. I would be despising the life that God has called me to if I sat back and said, I'm not going to keep trying to get better. Friends, we need to be open to learn from anybody and everybody. And rather than thinking about whether or not the source is a qualified source, we need to be listening and thinking, is there something in what's being said, regardless of the source, that I can apply to my life and my situation? Our ability to receive correction from a myriad of places will affect our future, and it will affect the future of the people around us. What the Proverbs are calling us to is a posture of teachability, and what that means is our ability to be taught. To hear correction from people, even people that we might distrust, or people that we don't know, or people that we don't know how much they care about us. what we recognize is that everyone in our life has the potential to teach us something if we're open to it. That's the posture of teachability. In our staff meeting this week, we were talking about this series, and I threw out the question, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? And Dela said, and you can, I might misquote you, but she said essentially this. She said, knowledge is knowing stuff. Wisdom is when you apply what you know to your life. And I think that's right. You can know a lot of stuff, but if you don't apply it to your life and do with it what you need to do with it, then that's not living wisely. Question. How many of you feel like the things, the life hacks that we've looked at these last 3 weeks around guarding our heart and fear of the Lord and friendship, how many of you feel like if you applied what we learned in those weeks, that was good stuff, very on target for living a better, more fruitful life? How many of you would agree with that? All right, that's most of us. Think about the person that wrote the Proverbs we've looked at. Solomon. Solomon was purported to be the wisest man on the planet at the time. And early in his reign, he was rocking it. If you read 1 Kings 3, after David passes and Solomon becomes king, Solomon makes a request of God, and he says, Lord, I don't want silver, I don't want wealth, I don't want it. What I need is wisdom. He said, I need a listening heart so that I can lead these people and govern these people well, because nobody can do this alone. And God replied, hey, great request. I will grant that. And so God, it says in the scriptures that God made him the wisest person to ever live. And you get to the end of chapter 3, and it says the people recognized his wisdom and his astute leadership in governing them and leading them. So for the first part of his reign, he was doing well. But then you fast forward a number of years and you get to 1 Kings chapter 11, and it says that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, 1,000 women in his life. That's not wise. That's stupid. And I'm going to exercise wisdom and leave it right there. And what the scriptures tell us is that those women led him away from the Lord. Now, I don't know when he wrote the Proverbs. I don't know if it was before the women or in the midst of accumulating the women or after the women. I don't know. But what is interesting to me is here is this guy who assembles this amazing collection of life hacks for his children that we have the opportunity to learn from millennia later. And yet, he found his life, the end of his life, it was in shambles. And Solomon didn't have the excuse, oh, I just didn't know. No, he wrote it all down. He knew, he just didn't apply what he knew. Friends, I could stand up here week after week and declare to you the marvelous truths of the Scriptures. But if I don't practice what I preach, I can still fall into moral failure and crater my life, even though I know all this stuff. See, it's not about what you know. Teachability is about putting into practice what you know. Wisdom is a present and active choice we make because we are teachable in our life. We act on what we learn. Teachability is not what we know, but it is the posture of learning that says, I'm going to listen to correction and rebuke from everybody in my life, and I'm going to try to find the truth in that and apply that to my life so that I can get better. So where do we find correction? Well, one place you can find it is in the Scriptures. If you read through the Proverbs, I promise you, you will find no fewer than 20 places where you say, okay, I probably shouldn't do that anymore. Or, man, this is a good idea. I should do this. The Scriptures are a great place to go for correction. Another place you can go is to someone you respect. You can just say, hey, I'd love for some feedback in this area of my life. When you watch me, what do you see with regard to this area? Because I'm not sure I'm walking this out right. And then just be open when correction comes from unsolicited sources. We need to be open to anybody. Friends, if you are a follower of Jesus, you should be one of the most teachable people on the planet. Because as a follower of Jesus, you have already admitted that you are broken. Right? We come to Jesus because we know that we are sinners and we cannot save ourselves and we need Him to come into our lives. See, as a follower of Jesus, we've already raised our hand and said, I need help. And so, why can't we stay in that posture? As we've allowed Him to come in and save us, let Him continue to save you. Let Him continue to grow you. Let Him continue to use people in your life to bring insight into your life so that you can step more fully into the fullness of life He saved you for. That's what teachability is. See, teachability is when I recognize that I am weak. And as followers of Jesus, we have all said, I am weak. But also, as Paul says to the Corinthians, God's grace is sufficient. And His strength is made perfect in my weakness. And so when I recognize that I am weak, that's when I actually become strong. Because I allow God to work in me and people and allow Him to use people to do that. Teachability is not, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Teachability says, I don't care if you don't care. If you've got correction for me, I'll take it. So let's be the most teachable people on the planet. Let's learn from everything, every moment, every person, so that our future is a place of honor and wisdom and beauty and love and life. To do anything else, it's just stupid. Let me pray for us. Lord, I thank you for your word. I thank you for I thank you for the truth that just keeps penetrating, if we will allow it to. As I told the prayer team this morning, I pray, Lord, that you will help me to be an applier of what I know. And I pray that for all of us in this room, that we wouldn't just sit here on Sundays and listen and say, oh, that's a good word, but we would walk out saying, Lord, what do I do with this? How do I apply this so that I can step more completely into the fullness of life you have for me? Lord, help us not to be stupid. Help us to love correction so that we can step into the fullness of life. For your name's sake we pray. Amen. Please stand. So I told you I put some minutes in the bank last week. I just took them out. Hey, don't forget about the school backpacks. Deanne and I are filling 10. All right, so I'm just laying down the gauntlet, throwing it down. There's the challenge. So let's just blow this away and bless those families, bless those kids, and let's send them back to school well stocked, shall we? We've got, as a church, we believe in the power of prayer. And we've got some testimonies that will be coming forth in the coming weeks that I think you will just be thrilled to hear about how God has answered prayer in the lives of some of the people in our congregation. So if you are in need of prayer for anything, we will have a prayer team down front on either side of the sanctuary, and just encourage you to avail yourself of that opportunity. The prayer corps this morning had 3 words for us. Step up to higher ground. I don't know if that resonates for anybody, but maybe you've felt like you're not moving up and God's convicting you. Maybe that is a word for you. Another one was surrender. Maybe that resonates. Another one was log jam. Maybe feeling squeezed or just bottled up in your life. If any of those things resonate with you, our prayer team would love to pray with you about that or anything else. So let's go out this morning with these words from Solomon. Gotta love this. Let's read this together. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. Amen. We're dismissed.